And we're back, and you are with Villaincast, BJJ Anti-Heroes, with myself, Chris the Villain Paynes. Weekly podcasts featuring either my fellow black belt Naki Arshed on our show Reap the Week, or bespoke episodes with other personalities across Jiu-Jitsu. But before we jump into this next show, a quick thank you to everyone on Patreon who's supporting us. If you'd like to help support what we're doing, find out more via chrispaynesbjj.com. And now, the next episode. And we're back with Villaincast. It's myself, Chris Paynes, the villain, and really excited to do this one. There is no plan for this episode, but I have Greg Souders on with me, and he's the guy right now. Like anytime I hear about the ecological approach and different ways of teaching jiu-jitsu, Greg's name comes up, and the amount of people who I speak to and they say, you have to talk to this guy, have you heard this guy? I'm like, yep, I need to speak to Greg. And so we've not spoken before. We had a quick hello before we hit the record on this, but yeah, this is when Chris met Greg, and let's just see where this goes. So just for the 5 people who listen to this podcast and don't know who you are, if you'd like to introduce yourself, sir.
That's a big order. I don't really know who I am to these 5 people, but I'm just a fucking Matt Rat who really wants to improve the way we talk about and train jiu-jitsu. I'm a school owner in the East Coast of the United States, at a place called Rockville, Maryland. And I opened a small school about 8 years ago, and just kind of took out on this coaching journey, trying to be the best coach I could possibly be. And so in this journey, I stumbled across some different ways to approach coaching, and started applying something called the ecological approach to how I run my class. And just recently got some, quote, whatever, notoriety, whatever the fuck that means, on what I was saying and how I was doing things. But yeah, man, just, typical Matt Rat who loves jiu-jitsu and wants to become the best coach at it that I possibly can. So it's pretty much who I am.
So you've been doing jiu-jitsu now for
18 years.
18 years. Yeah, I saw it was on it was like 2004 or something like that. So you've been around a while. What should I'm learning a lot right now. So what was your beginning in jiu-jitsu?
So I started with a team called Team Lloyd Irvin. I mean, they're a notorious American team.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where I started. I actually started at affiliate school down here where I live. And after training about 3 years with this affiliate school, I moved up to the Camp Springs area where Lloyd Irvin is, and I was training under him full time until I left the team in 2013 and sort of went off on my own. So yeah, my jiu-jitsu journey just started, just a guy who's interested. I mean, because 2004 was when I think the Ultimate Fighter boom was happening, and all these schools were opening up and jiu-jitsu was becoming super popularized. And I was already kind of a fan of MMA by watching people fight. I didn't even know gi jiu-jitsu existed. I just thought jiu-jitsu was fighting. So that's what I wanted to do. I was 19 years old. I stumbled into a gym, and I've literally been on the mats every single day, bar any injury or any other bullshit that's kept me away. But yeah, I mean, I just ran into a room, happened to be a Lloyd Irvin affiliate, and then spent the last the 9-year period training on that team.
So was that kind of approach, the ecological approach, something you got from Lloyd's, or so when did you start coming across this? No.
Oh no. So Lloyd's the complete opposite. He's Anders Ericsson IP all the way.
Just because I've met Ryan, and Ryan's got some really Ryan Hall.
I know Ryan very well.
Oh no, I didn't want to say Ryan. We both know Ryan, but for anyone listening to this, who's Ryan? Ryan Hall. He's got some interesting ways of doing jiu-jitsu, and I just wondered if there was any connection as to from Lloyd Irvin as that would be the case.
Well, actually, yes. So actually, Ryan, this is the strangest thing, but there's this. I'll tell this quick story if you don't mind about Ryan that sort of always has been in the back of my head. That kind of, I guess, I sort of a precursor to this. Honestly, if I'm being honest. So we were purple belts together, and we were at a tournament, and we just got done competing in this tournament circuit. Would have MMA and Thai boxing fights afterwards. So people would just hang out, get in the regular street clothes, drinking, hang out, chill. And we were watching these fights, and Ryan and I were sitting together, and he was like, "Hey man, I know the secret to jiu-jitsu." I was like, Oh yeah. And he was like, "Have you ever wondered why there's a triangle in every single jiu-jitsu logo?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "It's a form of base, man." And then he started like breaking down what the triangle meant, why it's important, why it represents base, edges and corners, blah blah blah. And so he was basically teaching me this idea that jiu-jitsu is a physical system. So it's this idea that if we align our bodies in this specific way, we get big outcomes, or we get outcomes that are more favorable than if we just use effort. And so we should go about learning how to move more efficiently and align ourselves more efficiently to get, like I said, a better outcome. And he said that to me that night and kind of was teaching me about that idea he had in his head. And I always stuck with me because that night we really talked about three things. And it's odd that I remember this. He said, one, that jiu-jitsu is a physical system. Two, that it's a zero-sum game. And three, that situations dictate tactics. And I had never really let those three things go because they sort of form my foundational understanding of what the hell we're doing. And it's just funny that it came from him. And it was just like a afterthought in the back of my mind that lasted with me forever. And it was through him that I learned those things.
Funny enough, I initially met Ryan. He came to the UK. I was a white belt, so he would not have any reason to remember me. But it would have been as he came over for the ADCC in 2011 for Nottingham. And he did a seminar that I went to. I'd seen some of his bits and pieces on YouTube for triangles, weirdly enough. And back then, I didn't realize the importance of some of the stuff he was saying until I met Preet Mickelson. Because two of the things that Ryan said was control is based upon who inhabits the space between the other person's knees and armpits.
That's
It's funny how that would define my fucking career. And the other one was it's you have a base and your balance, and your balance is your shadow over your base. And to sweep someone is you want to interrupt that. You want to try and separate their balance from their base. And there's those two kind of things. I might be murdering that quite a lot, but just those two ideas again have like stuck with me since 2011. And that's probably one of my first kind of introductions to a different way of understanding jiu-jitsu, to have someone explain it that way instead of here's a sweep, do this. But to actually get it, have it broken down that way that's probably the initial start of me going onto this path as well. Is Ryan.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, he was always like that. He's always trying to figure things out. Ryan's a very intelligent guy who's well read and kind of stays with the pulse of what's happening. And he was just always on the edge of things, always trying to be different. Not different for different sake, but just trying to understand what he was doing as deeply as possible. And so it's nice when you get to run into guys like that before you're the guy that's like that. You know what I mean? It's like he started jiu-jitsu a little bit before me, and so he was sort of ahead of the curve. But anyway, I'm glad that we had that conversation because I've thought about it since that day.
I mean, talking about yourself and Ryan and I've been on the BJJ Mental Models podcast of Steve Kwan a couple of times now.
Me too.
And listening, I completely I know, and listening to how you speak and the ideas that you have, and you're a very intelligent guy. I feel like a goddamn monkey because I didn't hit this through any sort of understanding about pedagogy or improved coaching practices or anything like that. I'm just like looking at it thinking, what would make these people better? Like, I suck. Like, how would they get better than me? And it's funny, like, I've studied into these things and we're not too dissimilar apart. Yeah, I hit there from like maybe more of a brute force, ignorant kind of method. And so that's one of the reasons why I was really excited to talk to you. It's like, I've a lot to understand about what the fuck I'm doing.
Well, actually, the reason I was excited to talk to you is because I like the way you were saying things. I think that what I think we'll get into later, but it's the idea that you can reach this effective level of perception without knowing anything, just noticing something, just seeing something happen in front of you and ask the question, what the fuck am I looking at? And so when I first heard you talk, because basically what happened was there was a girl that I was doing these like coaching consulting calls, and I did them for free for like 8 months, and I was spending probably like 12 hours a week on the phone. And I was talking to all these people, and there's this girl from Colorado who called me. She's a white belt. Her and her husband were trying to put together their own practices, and I was trying to help them design a way to engage in whatever that she wanted to work on. And she brought you up. She said, the reason I'm talking to you is you sound like this guy, Chris Paynes. And that was the first time I ever heard your name. So, of course, I go down the rabbit hole on it because I want to know who the hell is saying other things. I want to learn. So, uh, yeah, so and then I stumbled across you on Sonny Brown's podcast, and I listened to what you were saying to him, and then the way that you were describing that, you see now that jiu-jitsu is basically just a grip fight, and the way that we're approaching solving these problems isn't efficient, training isn't matching what we're discovering, and anyway, so I was like, oh, I got to talk to this guy. He's on the same page, regardless of how we speak about it. We're seeing the same phenomenon, so I think there's value in us connecting.
Oh, completely. And that's again, like it feels so funny for Steve messaged me and said, "Oh, you come back on the podcast." I'm like, why? Like, you have these really smart guys. I'm just, maybe I'm a translator for other dumb people like me, but that's about it. Like, I can maybe speak ape, and that's the only.
I mean, I think we're living in right now, especially this cult of personality thing, and it's kind of been running sales and marketing forever. And uh, everybody has their own preferred personality. You know what I mean? Like what people accuse me of, quote, sounding like a PhD or talking too quickly or whatever the fuck they say. Or Greg's too intense. I can't listen to him, bro. He gets all excited. And I'm like, yo, and so they'll go to you. We might be saying the same shit, right? But you're
Yeah.
oh, you kind of, anyway. And people just prefer to listen to who they listen to, no matter if it's the same thing being said.
It was funny because I actually got shown it was on the mental models Discord the other day, a meme that someone had made of Danaher, and it's, he says, like, such and such, should break their kazushi and everything, and it's just like me next to it just saying, just fuck with this balance. And I'm like,
because it's the same thing.
Yeah, no.
Like, we're talking to an American population and we want to speak Japanese. Like, what the fuck sense does that make? And I'm not dissing Danaher. I mean, actually, I really like what Danaher has to say, and I kind of like his highbrow approach to speaking about what's going on, because we need some type of leader in language in that space. We need someone to inspire a more serious way to discuss things, so we all have some end to reach to. If he's going to be the guy right now that's sort of controlling that space, so either we match him or we get better than him. But some of the things I'm just like, come on, man. Like, kazushi means destabilization, and it doesn't even tell the whole picture. Like, destabilization is always what's happening, and it was what Kano gave us. It was the principal objective that tied all the techniques together. It was this idea that a body was more easily damaged when it was taken out of its structure. And kazushi, as destabilization, refers to two methods of this. This is destabilization as relates to balance, or as it relates to falling. And then we have destabilization as it relates to structural integrity, like straightening a straight arm is an example of kazushi. Twisting a bent arm is an example of kazushi. So this is the fundamental feature of moving a body and breaking a body simultaneously. So we can discuss it at a higher level than just repeating what the Japanese called it.
Yeah. Which, again, like, I think my kind of explanation of that came from Ryan, is that when he explained this idea of base and balance is... And again, I'm murdering it and maybe adding my own bits over the years from this, but there's a hierarchy of importance in a fight, and if you are balanced, it's almost like it's in a secondary list. Your breathing and your balance are on a secondary list, and your main concern is fighting me. But if I fuck with either of those two things, I don't care how important you think the fight with me is, you have to address that base and balance issue. And whilst you're doing that, I can do what the fuck I want. And so that just then from that 2011 seminar, I've pretty much just kept on with that. Like, I will fuck with your base, your balance and your breathing all of the time. And so the last thing on your list of priorities is me, and I get free reign to do what I want. And so again, we're hitting these same ideas, and I think it's, again, like, I was really interested to hear why, or what was the catalyst that got you into changing up how you talk. Like, what was the moment you looked at the normal Lloyd Irvin approach, shall we say, and gone, fuck this?
I mean, really, well, so I started saying fuck this before I said fuck this. It's like, when you first kind of feel like something's wrong, but you don't really know what it is and how to say it, but it's just kind of this discomfort inside you. Like, so that sort of hit me first, like, this is just not right. Something's wrong. But when I'm the type of dude who fully invests in what I do, so I believed in him. I believed in what he was saying. I believed in the things he told me, because Lloyd Irvin at his base, no matter what everyone else thinks about him, is an intelligent man who knows how to create a culture. He knows how to convince you that you can do something, or what he wants you to do. Okay, it's a double-edged sword. So I bought in, and I drilled so much that he would send people to me to drill. Like, I was that guy. I was fully bought in, but my body was beat up. None of the stuff I was doing was transferring into the performance environment. So I was like, fuck, something's just not right. And the truth is, it really wasn't until I decided that I was going to become a coach that I made that change. What the catalyst for me was, I had this intellectual responsibility. Like, I realized that every asshole opens up jiu-jitsu school and puts on their fucking website, same thing I have on mine, we're going to teach you jiu-jitsu. But the question is, can you? If this is your first time opening a school and you put that on your website, you're telling someone that you can do something. So then you have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, can you do this? Where's the evidence? So I don't know, that hit me right away once I published first time I published the name of my school and what I was going to do. And then I felt like I had to know. So I started reading. I started looking into coaching through other fields. I started looking at the D1 coaches here in America and what they were doing. Anyway, kind of stumbled down that road, and I bumped into this ecological dynamics or ecological psychology shit.
Again, that's I think that's kind of interesting as well. I think I said this on the Forever White Belt podcast the other day. Like, we're just podcasting to death right now. Is when it came to, again, I probably, for the same reasons, in that, so I was pretty much given the school I was at, or told to look after the jiu-jitsu grappling. It wasn't jiu-jitsu, it was just grappling program, until the coaches came back that were injured, simply because I was the only person in the room that could read. And so there were guys in there who'd been, already training for about 5 years, and I was there like 6 months in, and you think they should have been given the school. But just because I'd bought Jiu-Jitsu University and a couple of Eddie Bravo books that made me possibly more qualified about technique than these guys,
Probably were.
And so, like, that was essentially it. Like, I was like, I don't know what the hell am I supposed to do? And like, you know how to triangle? He's like, yeah, just keep doing that. I was like, okay. So, essentially bought, all these books because I wanted to do good by these guys and see them, because it was a quite, it was a small team. It was only like 5 or 6 people, but, it was quite a competitive school. It had always been known for being a violent school in the area. It had a reputation. Like, it wasn't something you found on the internet or on Facebook. It was pre-Facebook. It was word of mouth of, you've heard of this place. Oh shit. Yeah, that's where you go. And so I saw like I had to keep that reputation going. So I wanted to do better coaching. But you mentioned about like D1 wrestlers and stuff. Is I think I said on the Forever White Belt podcast of, up until recently, there hasn't been a lot of money in jiu-jitsu, which hasn't attracted smart coaches. So trying to find good coaching practice meant going elsewhere. And when I want to understand better how to compete and get over anxiety and, explain those ideas to other people who are competing alongside me from the team, was to look at NFL coaches and see how they dealt with team anxiety. And, I thought, well, there's a lot of money in those guys, and so they must know what the hell they're doing. And my understanding of how, it completely changed how I understood how to compete overnight, to the point where, I've been at competitions in the past and people have, gone, where's Chris? People who know me, and they're like, oh yeah, he's asleep over there. Like, yeah, he's on in like 10 minutes. Like, yeah, he knows he's going to be awake in 8. Like, isn't he going to warm up? No, he's napping right now. Right, okay. What is that next to him? A notepad. What's he going to do with that? Write down things that he likes. And so, there's other guys who are like, headphones on, jumping up and down, doing star jumps or skipping or whatever. And there's me napping with a notepad. And that I got that from NFL, like, of bring things back under your control. The anxiety is you trying to control things that aren't under your control anymore. You're trying to control the uncontrollable. So bring things back under your control. Say what you're going to do, which then makes sense when you hear, again, that kind of that language issue that we have We're communicative animals, and we suck at communication.
For sure.
You hear, visualization. Cool. What do you mean? And essentially, that was it. Like, you don't try and necessarily envisage, countering what the other person's going to do and just being reactive. Be proactive. Visualize what you want to do. And that was, getting a notepad out and just writing, I'd like to leg lock you. I'd like to. That was essentially my visualization. And all of a sudden that kind of clicked for me. I was like, oh, damn. And I think it's interesting, especially, I don't know if Meta Morris or ADCC was the catalyst for this, but it started to bring in these smart ass people. And I think since then, the understanding of coaching has really exploded.
Well, I think it's this like accidental connection between the mechanical and tactical and strategic understanding for jiu-jitsu and like the nerdy mind, right? Because jiu-jitsu kind of made this promise that a weaker guy could beat a bigger guy. So then, of course, who's that going to attract? Weak, vulnerable guys who want to beat bigger guys, right? So that's who they're going to pull into the sport. And so these guys are going to mess around and tinker with it just like they do everything else, and they're going to start to pull it apart. You know what I mean? Of course, if that culture is allowed to thrive, but I think that's kind of what happened to us. These guys who after work wanted to go, see what it's like to get rough and figure it out, and it just seemed to attract that type of person. I talked about this with somebody. It was one of the podcasts I was on or whatever. But the funny thing now is that not only the smart guys are involved, but now the athletes are getting involved. So now we
Yeah.
have a new fucking problem. Like, this whole little guy beats big guy shit. That's a myth.
Oh,
Uh,
completely.
and so it's funny now. Like I was talking to him, I was like, "Yeah, man. So this you can be a nerd, but you got to be a jack nerd who likes to fight, because if you're not, that nerdy mind shit's going right out the window once a big guy picks you up and slams you on your back."
Mikey Musumesi's ears are just pricked up from that. Like, it's like someone's talking about me. I'm not sure in what way.
Well,
Like, I
no,
have to
forget
be
that. Like,
smart
yeah, look.
and athletic.
I mean, look at Mikey. I mean, he's all ripped up and shit. You know what I mean? He's
Exactly.
competitive. Like, he goes
And he's
hard. You know
smart
what I
as
mean?
fuck, and so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like he is that prototype.
It's funny, we forget that we're fighting. Like I can't stand all this talk about where they try to parse out techniques and they try to separate it from the effort that's required to employ these techniques. I'm like, dude, I've never trained with an elite guy that didn't feel like death, that would just
Yeah.
put their hands on you and just beat the brakes off you. You know what I mean? No matter how good they were, that shit was physical, it was effortful, and it hurt. Anyway, so I'd like to
Yeah.
keep those two things married, those high effort athletic types with the nerdy intelligent types.
Like, I made the joke earlier. Like, jiu-jitsu's definitely gone down a route of, jiu-jitsu for everyone. No, it's not. And then, maybe, anyone can join a jiu-jitsu club. You're more than welcome to come through the door, but it may not be for you. And I remember when I started, 14 years ago, I'd go to these competitions in, sports halls in the UK, and it looked like a white nationalist meeting. Like, there was just jacked dudes with shaved heads everywhere, and no one owned a rash guard. It was school kind of physical education PE shorts, and that was it. And they I remember one dude got choked out in his first round. He had a repage fight, and he got choked out in that round as well. Like, that dude wasn't smart. Like, he got choked out like twice on the bounce, and so, and it was it was rough. You see those old videos of some old what came up earlier with the Jeff Monson one from like 2004, where like the fight breaks out. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just like, we wouldn't see that these days. Not as much, at least.
Well, there's one when what the guy's name? A guy from Unity got slapped in the face, and then it was at the first ADCC Open over here in Las Vegas, and they got in a full-on fist fight, and the Murillo Santana jumped in, and there was some situation there. But yeah, a fight broke out. They were swinging, man.
Yeah, exactly. It's like and that's, I think, the problem is that we've gone down this whole jiu-jitsu for everyone, and we've tried to adapt the jiu-jitsu to be for everyone. In the case, like, it pains me when I have someone who comes up to me with the tiniest legs, and they say, "Oh, how do I triangle guys who have got like giant shoulders?"
You don't.
Fucking don't. Like, it's not, you're not entitled to have every technique available for you. I don't
For
know,
sure.
care what the advert says when it says jiu-jitsu for everyone, but it ain't. And
Well,
that's not the technique for you on
no,
this point.
and not trying to purposely take it over to the ecological approach. They talk about in ecology that the whole idea is that we're using the task environment individual system we're manipulating that and its variations to create behavior. And one of the principles they discuss and what and why behaviors emerge from individual constraints is this idea of limiting factors. So there are certain individual constraints that are limiting factors to what movement solutions can emerge while solving a physical problem. So you think about the guy with the fat belly who can't take anybody's back because his belly is bigger than his legs are long. That's a limiting factor, right? So we can't act like it's not there. We have to, that is an individual constraint that's going to guide the movement solution that emerges from your attempts to do X, Y, or Z. And it's up to us as coaches to recognize that being real and not try to have that guy, go down that rabbit hole of trying to put his hooks in when he'll never be able to do it. And so there needs to be a deeper level of honesty, not only with ourselves as coaches, but directly with our students, which I've gained a reputation of. I'm a pretty direct guy, and I tell my students directly, yo, you're fat. If this wants to be easier for you, got rid of that thing hanging off your gut, because you're not going to be able to do this behavior.
So I'm so glad I've had you on. Like, I didn't want a career and to have a podcast that went on, but there we go. Like, so I'm sure I'm going to get some messages across this. Yeah, essentially the same. And I think it was that almost, a mixture of pre and learn the defensive postures definitely changed how, I've said it before, like Christian Graugart, the Globetrotter, when he first started learning the defensive postures was, he looked at it and went, well, how the hell am I going to teach side control now? I know it doesn't exist. And so that can, force the reaction of, how teaching different. But I guess, half of that, again, like I said, that the constraints of the person is, I just eventually got sick of people, maybe.
Oh no! If you're a teacher, you'll get sick of people real quick. Like
in that,
now, so
all these questions of like, how do I do this? And there's me trying to rack my brain thinking, oh, how does a short person with tiny legs triangle the giant shouldered guy? Like, I know it's impossible, and then I'm just going, you can't. Why are you asking? Like, if you can't, it's not for you. Let's find something that does work for you. This technique isn't yours. Sorry. You may like the look of it, and it will work against, people with really skinny shoulders. But that's the idea of a game plan. You don't just brute force the same game plan against everyone. You find one that works for your body and the body of the type of person you're drilling with.
Well, this is also why part of my coaching program is to have students focus on invariants. So these are things shared between, or that all bodies have in common, right? And they're not only invariant features of the human body that we know produce, one effect over another more consistently, but when two bodies are fighting, there's these steady states or the invariant features that show up in the system as they fight, that anyone can manipulate regardless of body size, body type, belly type, whatever you have, and it's focusing on those invariants that make you a better grappler, right? Not focusing on the triangle or the arm lock or whatever technique you want to name, but how you're exchanging with your partner and what you're trying to do to that person is really what we need to focus on, right? So it kind of erases that problem. You don't need to triangle anybody. A triangle is what we call an arm in, arm out strangle. So arm in, arm out strangles can be expressed many different ways. We have head and arm guillotine. We have head and arm strangle, chest facing. We have triangle. We have buggy. These are all examples of the same thing. So if we understand the invariant nature of head and arm strangles, then we can get them with different parts of our body aligned differently based on our individual constraints. So again, trying to force someone to understand a specific alignment that has nothing to do with their individual constraints is not only a waste of that person's time, but it's a mismanagement of our understanding of how grappling emerges and why it emerges. So that's frustrating to see coaches still do that.
I think the normal way of teaching jiu-jitsu, the standard method, dogmatic approach, if you're going to be honest about your coaching and wanting to do best by your students, you have to abandon it, because like you just said, like if we're just going to drill a technique, like we're going to do triangles, and everyone in the room wants to take part in the class, they may have a partner who isn't suited to do triangles against. Yet they still want to be part of the class, and then we have an element of guilt as a coach. We look at that person and go, "Ah, shit! Like, well, you ain't doing this class then, I guess." Like, And then they look at the thing. Well, I paid my money. I'm entitled to get this technique. Show me how it works. Smart man. And then we go down this silly rabbit hole, going, well, I'm sure you could do it this and this, and we know it's nonsense, and they're never going to use it. But like I say, if you are honest with that person, I mean, drilling is essentially, you're doing a technique. That's only, in a setup or whatever, that's only going to work against that body type that you're currently doing against right now. Because the second you change that variable of the body type or anything, it's a different technique. It has
everything changes.
Exactly. And so you think the drilling that you're doing is very, 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 like, much more specific than you think it is. It only exists in this very narrow frame. And, like I said, I maybe have different ways of explaining things, like, when it comes to hand fighting, you mentioned earlier. The main way I kind of explain it is this idea that hand fighting is just it's a way of breaking through the pocket to get to the clinch. And it's chaos of smoke particles. You're shining a laser pen through smoke, and certain particles are illuminating. And that is, once upon a time, that coach found, got from A to B through the smoke. Those particles were in alignment that day, and now I'm going to teach you it. And so when you try and then repeat that same setup, you're trying to realign particles of chaos.
Well, so I like that. That's an interesting way to describe it. What you're talking about is something called perspective control. So perspective control is the idea that we prospect for information, and then we gain that information, our perception changes relative to our action, then it changes our action. So, like, they talk about this perception action link as being a precursor to emergent behavior, and the idea behind perception and action is that it's not a chicken or the egg, like which comes first, which comes second. They're both happening at all times. To live in the world, you must act in it. When you act, you perceive, you pick up information, and then you act off that perception. And so hand fighting, I'm going to say hand fighting in general as a blanket statement, but hand fighting is how we prospect for the information we need to go in the direction that we're going in relative to our objective within the game. So hand fighting is to grapplers like punching is to boxers. Like, we're playing a grasping game where we're trying to grab a hold of our opponent and use grasping leverages for a particular effect. So if we're not hand fighting, then we are not grappling. We're doing something else. So it really is all hand fighting from beginning to end.
Completely. But again, like, it's that, the atypical approach to jiu-jitsu of, here's essentially a hand fight that I used once upon a time. Drill this hand fight. And especially, I came from a more traditional background of martial arts. I did various ones as I was younger. Like, I then thought, like, I have to replicate exactly what I was shown. And, I don't feel like I'm terribly alone in that, the amount of people who are still, like, asking for, on different forums or Facebook groups, like, they need, some new passes from half guard. Like, why? What's wrong with the one you have?
Because they don't understand the method to getting to that. See, the problem is exactly. Our community only sees solution. They don't see the formula. They don't even know what the variables are. They don't know what the problem is. This is like, learning addition by constantly asking your mom what does 2 + 2 mean? What does 3 + 5 mean? And then being like, I got it. No, you fucking don't. You just listen to what your mom just told you. You don't know anything. And so you have a bunch of guys who remember a bunch of shit that doesn't mean anything anyway, thinking they know something, but they don't know anything. Right? Like, if you ask somebody, and actually I thought it was really cool that what you just talked about, you were talking about as someone's base and breathing being the foundational aspects of fighting. Dude, that is completely true. And that is something that we need to take seriously when we're looking at jiu-jitsu. But if you ask somebody what the foundational aspects of fighting are, they wouldn't be able to tell you that. You could probably ask 99% of the community and they would never come to breathing and base. I'm serious.
Yeah.
And so that's troubling. Like, who are we taking advice from if they don't understand that your body will prioritize those two things over all else?
And that reforms then, like, again, I think when you first sent me a voice message is that, I was grasping through the air trying to figure out how to find the most concise way of doing this for people walking into the gym. I think I've kind of hit it now. I'm quite happy with the current setup, shall we say. But like I said, that's one that absolute foundations of understanding of fighting, like, Kazushi, whatever you want to call it, Mr. Danaher. I need to fuck with your base and if you're breathing. If I can fuck with those two things, I can make you panic and do dumb shit, and you're not going to think of me at that point in time. But if I was to ask someone to then construct a fundamental jiu-jitsu course, that would not be a part of it. You'd fall back straight onto, well, here's a closed guard, here's a side control, here's a mount, here's an Americana, there's random shit you have no context for.
Well, what's even funnier is that's not even jiu-jitsu. So jiu-jitsu is not actions. Jiu-jitsu is a philosophy. Grappling are the actions that we're doing. So jiu-jitsu is just the philosophy of efficiency. It can be simply stated as more versus less, right? So we use more versus less to get more outcome than we give input, right? So that's literally all it is. It's a way we think about how to manipulate a body at superior angles and distances and whatever. That's all it is. Grappling is the action that we're doing. But again, most people don't even understand what the hell they're doing. I've been distilling this down for about 8 years. And so trying to come up with a very simple way to explain what the hell is going on. And if you've listened to me before, you listen to me say it a million times, but we play the game of immobilization as it leads to strangulation and breaking. And so then if we know that, then what we have to do is we have to study the actions to understand how to best immobilize a body or prevent from being immobilized. And that gives us the foundational approach to how we should take action against our opponent, or how should we take action to resist our opponent. And if you can look at it this way, things make much more sense, and designing a practice plan becomes much easier.
It's again, like, I think we all kind of, it was in the same ballpark when we try and explain this. I mean, it was, I'm fortunate enough to go to a Mr. Danaher seminar back in about 2016, and he was flanked by Messrs. Tonin and Ryan at the time, and he mentioned about the 4-step jiu-jitsu program. I think it's on Rogan as well.
Put him down past the legs, hold him down.
Yeah. Get him down to the ground, take him to World Jiu-Jitsu, get past the most dangerous part of the body, go through a hierarchy of controls, and either manipulate one of their joints to destroying a ligament, or choke them. And I said that's a pretty decent philosophy on this. And I essentially started saying this, roughly the same thing. Jiu-jitsu is, when new people start join the gym, I give them the exact same thing as soon as they walk in. This is a philosophy. The philosophy is, how do I take down, hold down, and
get up,
submit you? And if I'm on the floor, I reverse that process. I don't want to be submitted, so we're going to look at stopping that. I don't want to be held down, and I want to get back onto my feet. And this is the essentially what we're going to try and accomplish. Now you have context for it. Now hopefully this is going to start making more sense, instead of just, here's a bunch of things, no context.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, I tell everyone the first thing we have to be able to do is beat up the ignorant antagonist. And they're like, what's the ignorant antagonist? Like, I'll show you. You're going to get on top of your partner, and they're going to push you off. Okay, so bottom guy, this person's going to mount you. They're going to sit on your hips, and I want you to use your arms, and as violently as possible, I want you to push them off of you. Top player, don't let them do that. Go. How? Well, just go. Figure it out, man. Feel it. Can you stop someone from pushing you off them? If you can't, that's the first place you start. Because what's more foundational than an aggressive person shoving you? That's how all fights start in the playground, right? If you can't manage that in any of your given top positions, if you can't manage a basic push, then we can't even start the process. So again, stay on top, hold your partner down. That's the first lesson.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting as well. I mean, I've been badgering on about this. I'm sure if you heard that previous podcast, you've probably heard it. But this idea that there's parasitical elements in jiu-jitsu that are conditioning us to do dumb shit.
We call it the gentleman's agreement. Yeah, fuck the gentleman's agreement, man. Like,
gentleman's agreement. Yeah. But I think it's I need, exactly. I probably used the exact same or similar terminology in the past, but I find it wasn't aggressive enough to force change, and so calling it this awful parasite that makes everyone shit. In that, for anyone who hasn't heard me say it somehow, is this idea that if I we've all had those instances where we've had new people come to the gym, like wrestlers or rugby players or American football players or whatever, and you try and sweep them and they don't go over, but you can sweep a regular jiu-jitsu person. And I saw it recently, like it was on, I think, the Fanatics forum, someone saying that they're a brown belt and they find it easier fighting blue belts and purple belts than white belts, like brand new beginners. And there's some of the dissonance coming out of the fucking comments, like wanting me to drag my face along the pavement.
Oh, Reddit for me is like, it's where all the dumbass, I don't even know what to say. I can't even, I'm so emotional about Reddit. I hate it. It's a dumping ground for people's insecurities. That's what it is. It's a dumping ground for people's ignorance and insecurities. If that's what you're talking about, that's what forum you're talking about.
No, it was dude. Obviously, the amount of times I was seeing people say, well, they're not trained to do the right thing. I'm like, so what? Like, so because the brand new beginner's not trained to do the right thing, that they're doing the wrong thing, which happens to be the right thing that's stopping you what you're doing. And that's essentially the same thing with this. I say it from a position of guilt. I used to be able to sweep, blue belts, purple belts quite happily. Then I come across some belligerent, athletic beginner who just like, no, I'm not going onto why am I going onto my back? That seems stupid. I couldn't sweep the fuckers. And then over time, you condition them to go into guard, etc. And now they become sweepable because they think it's okay to go onto their back. And the amount of aspects of jiu-jitsu which are just those conditioned responses has I've said it quite a few times now. We are cosplaying as serious combat sports athletes now. We pretend that we have some sort of connection to legitimately scary people who do MMA and other things like that. But what the majority do in the gym now is nothing compared to that. But we live in the heyday of, if it wasn't for us, we'd be no MMA and UFC. Yeah, that was 30 years ago. There hasn't been a straight real jiu-jitsu person succeeding in MMA for a long time.
Well, what's funny is I think jiu-jitsu is what defines MMA, but the physical action that we're seeing has evolved into what wins a fight, right?
Yes.
So, again, like I said, it's the philosophy that guides the fight. We're still using it. However, we're not jumping close guard unless we're Kron Gracie trying to relive the 1991. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all these dads that want to throw pajamas on, just like, a weekend fan at football thinks of the same people that are playing on the front line.
It's
just we sold that fantasy. So as sales and marketers, we sold this fantasy that you could do it too. And now we're in the process of reverse engineering it. And the response that is so strong, it's like people are resisting us saying, hey guys, this thing has changed. This is a new beast now. This has become a full-fledged sport. And who comes to sport? Athletic people who like to compete. So if you're not that type of person, you're not going to find much success anymore, unless you go to a gym that continues to cosplay. But I think that's a new thing as gym owners that we're dealing with. We're dealing with this idea that there's this true emergence of what grappling is, and it's just as hard as any other sport.
And weirdly enough, I was down on the south coast of the UK today. We've both had pretty decent days. I was doing a seminar, and it was an ex-student of mine who moved away about 10 years ago. And we literally, what you said there, like, I hope he listens to this, like, hey Andy. But he literally said the exact same of, and it was interesting as well. Like, I think it was a Cerrone quote recently about TRT. That he's retired and he's starting to take TRT now, and he's like, oh my god, I can see why this is banned. It might have been a quote by him or someone like who like went down the rabbit hole of like other athletes saying it, but you can't allow guys to go into TRT when they're older, because they have the wisdom of someone who's been fighting a long time. Then you give them the athleticism of someone in their 20s again. Like, that's not fair. There has to be a trade-off somewhere. But again, like I say, it's a sport. Like, the athletic person, the bigger athletic person in a sport, it's a physical fucking thing. should win. And we go down this guilty route of like jiu-jitsu for all, and there's people saying, well, but what if they are a better wrestler and I can't get up? Fuck for you then.
Yeah, you're gonna be laying on the ground until you decide to do something about it or train enough to do something about it.
Exactly.
Uh,
Like, sorry, like you got to fix that then. Like maybe ask them for some tips. Um,
or
like
or just start trying to do what they're doing to you.
yeah, or
Um,
like I'm the older guy. Like how am I gonna beat up younger guys? Fuck. Like sorry, like I can't. Again, I can't help you with that entitlement issue that you have. Like do the best you can. Enjoy the sport. Athletic people are gonna be athletic. You can't
yeah,
help that.
it's like I can't stand this the people who try to diminish attribute. Like attribute is critical. Like you wouldn't tell a smart guy to stop being smart or a flexible guy to stop being flexible. So why the hell would you tell a overly competitive guy or strong guy to stop being either? Like you want them to bring that to the table because that's what's going to color their emergent behavior. That's what's going to color what comes out. And that's a very interesting thing that we can use our own individualized attributes to express ourselves in this thing. So we should let those exist and we should praise them, not reduce them. And the only time that I ever talk about an attribute being a problem is if it becomes a crutch or it itself becomes a limiting factor to what you can achieve, because sometimes that can happen.
Yeah, yeah,
The knucklehead that's used to squeezing everyone's head off, holding them down, sometimes can't break that attractor. And then all of a sudden they're stuck with this behavior that they can't change and they never grow. But other than that, if the attribute is benefiting the person, let them have it. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And I
Um,
actually wanted to say one more thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to keep
no,
talking so
completely.
much.
No, absolutely. Please.
When you were talking about the right wrong thing, this is something that we talk about a lot. And so one thing I always tell my students is right and wrongness is a spectrum, and the only thing that's right is what's effective now. And it doesn't mean that it can't be more effective, because at the end of that spectrum of rightness is what we call efficiency. This is when something can be done consistently at a low energy cost in a timely manner. So we want to take these effectivities that are right because they are effective, and we want to make them as efficient as we possibly can. So again, just pushing someone off you is an effective way to get off the bottom. So don't stop doing it until you have to do it another way, right? We can't solve the problems that we're not yet facing. So to tell somebody that they're doing something wrong is to put the cart before the horse, because you think that you have the jiu-jitsu equivalent of the knowledge of how to perfectly escape somebody's position by putting your arms in a specific shape. Well, what if it's not like that for him? You know what I mean? So anyway, so I always say right is wrong is a spectrum. We start first with effective.
It's kind of similar to Preet again. Preet Mickelson. He talks about this
Yeah,
kind of
talk to me.
like full spectrum. I'm still aware this is like a phone call and a podcast. So like anyone's listening, I'm like, I have to make sure that I say their full name.
Oh,
Just
I'm
in
so
case someone's
sorry.
like,
Yeah, I keep
like
forgetting
yeah,
too.
yeah. I know. It's like we're just chatting. It's like but talking to like a third person who isn't here. Yeah. So that's why I keep. I know. Yeah, I know you know all these people. But I'm just like I know I sound mental otherwise to you. But I just have to like be something of a host right now. So yeah, Preet Mickelson. It says about that kind of full spectrum of motion, like if you're doing closed guard passing, historically it showed me like you have to have a posture in getting up, but you also have to have a stack in and everything in between, and instead of just like only with the posture, because then if you don't, if all you ever have is someone with a posture, when you come across someone with a stack and it crushes your head and you don't know how to sweep them or submit them from there, well, you have a problem. And then again, we go back to that conditioning of, oh, you're doing it wrong. You have to posture. Then they posture and you kill them. You're like, what? They were doing the right thing / wrong thing that you thought was wrong, but was actually right. Then you got them to do this thing, and now you beat them. Like exactly, pretty much similar to what you were just saying there.
Well, all effectivities are relative to their task objective. So, and there's tons of variation in between. So everything right and wrong happens in degrees. It doesn't happen in absolutes. And these degrees are relative to the level of resistance the two athletes are imposing on each other and the time it takes to break down these resistances. So the structure, as it relates to what's going on, will constantly be in flux until it's effective enough to accomplish the goal. And this will always change. You can break down any movement, jiu-jitsu or otherwise, into three foundational things: your connections, your structures, and your movements, right? So we have to connect to the world to interact with it. We have to structure our body in a particular way to apply and receive force of all varying types, even the force of gravity. We got to structure ourselves a specific way. And then we have to move around the world. We have to have locomotion. We have to be able to move. And so these three things are always in flux, and they're always relative to what's happening in front of us at any given time. And again, there's so much variation present in any given time that we can never say that the same thing needs to be done in the same way every time.
No, completely. Exactly, and I think as soon as you start going down this rabbit hole of you essentially find these things to be true, you have to abandon the usual approach to jiu-jitsu because it can't carry on. So that's why I find it really interesting to see that the route you took here and what was like the different catalysts that kind of forced your hand, as it were. I said the main one I had was the defensive postures. Like, we can't do side control now. We can't learn that because there's something in the way, and our route there has been ruined, and we thought we were better than we were. So it was adapting to that and training better defense. And I like that idea of I talked to Rob Cole as well. I'm not sure which order these episodes will come out. Is the idea of having a dead partner, as it were. It's it's the bigger thing to be talked about is this idea that, like you said earlier about spoon feeding. I said on the previous one, like spoon feeding information to your students. Like, don't let them think for themselves. Like, here you go, here's another mouthful of technique for you. Instead of, you're an intelligent human being, I assume. Figure this out. I trust you to figure this out. Here's some parameters. Figure your way out. Here's some tools to do it with. And anyone who's ever tried to learn anything ever, this is how we learn everything. We try and we see a conundrum in front of us. We get given basic tools, then we go, right, I need to figure out how I need to get to this destination. How am I going to get there? And just asking the coach, go, right, what do I do now? Easy way out. You don't learn your times table at school by just remembering what the symbols mean and replicating them in the future. You try and understand what the X means in between these two numbers. So if you come across maybe a number that you haven't seen before, a combination of them, you can figure your way out of it instead of, well, I haven't seen that before, I need to go and ask coach again.
Well, it's funny. I try to not use language and numbers to describe what you're describing, because one of the central ideas behind ecological psychology and what separates it from the information processing approach is this idea of what's called direct perception. And it's this idea that our body, and however you want to define that, mind, body, connect, whatever, the whole thing is communicating with the world in front of it at all times based on affordances. So this idea that a body that can do things moves through a world that has things giving it information to be acted upon. So if I have a hand that grasps, things look graspable. If I have hips that bend, things look sittable. If I climb, things look climbable, right? And so this is direct perception. There's no way to really symbolically represent this with words, because we have to understand that our words and even numbers are indirect perception. These are agreed upon values that have no real place in reality. They're just the way that we communicate, or abstractions, right? So I tell people, I can't even tell you what to do because I don't know. Like, I can try to form the words, but what I can tell you is this: your opponent's hips, if you grasp around them, it will make them not move, or reduce their movement tremendously. So if you develop a deep relationship with your partner's hips, your ability to grasp a hold of them, and in using that relationship to hold your partner still, you're going to be better at what you're doing. And again, I'm simplifying the way I approach this. I'm just trying to share the idea with you. So again, getting people to focus on the world and act upon it, it gives stronger retention and transfer than telling somebody about the world. Like, telling them that it's almost as good as useless.
Again, I thought this was, I'm really. It feels like a Rogan podcast. We have someone who's, Rogan, and then someone who's intelligent next to him. That's how this currently feels.
I'm sorry, man. If
No,
there's
no,
anything I
not in the slightest. Like I'm really enjoying it. But funny how you said that recently is that because of this whole the approach I'm currently taking of just stand up, for example, that if you're not controlling someone's hips, they're going to get up because that's their engine. That's the most powerful part of their body. It's attached to their goddamn legs.
Yep.
And so if you release the hips, they're getting up fast. Whatever they want to accomplish is going to be done with their legs. So if you, and the way I go down that kind of analogy route is I refer to it as sugar in the gas tank. Like if that's their engine, I need to make it as sluggish as possible.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
and so yeah, like maybe I'm still using words incorrectly.
No,
Um,
no, no. That's not. I'm sorry. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying like your inclinations. I feel are good because I feel like I had those same inclinations too. I just went through the trouble of trying to develop language to describe the inclinations I was having, and then I used men who were smarter than me to help refine my ability to talk about it. And I listened to what they were telling me about these procedures. Um, so yeah, being hip centric, being hip focused is a critical invariant when we're trying to understand grappling, because the hips are the seat of balance, the hips are the seat of power. So if we teach our students to focus on our partner's hips for varying effects, we help them develop a relationship between the hips and their utility. Um, one of the things we try to teach about our connections, our structures, and our movements is that they all have a limit and a function. So if we understand the function our connections have as it relates to holding hips still and their limit, i.e., how long we can produce that function, then we develop a relationship that we can use often, and then we can go after over and over and over again to get similar results.
it's funny you mentioned about hips as well. Like hip. It was when you actually said hip centric movement. Uh, the what was it 2014 the DVD that Kit Dale and Nick Gregoriadis did together, the Roger Gracie's black belt. One of the parts that Nick talks about is hip centric movement, as in, like you say, the hips are the seat of everything, and if your shoulders go first, there's a giant gap, and you're not really connecting to them properly. But if your hips go first, you have that higher connection, that higher weight attachment, and again, that's something that I've known since watching that 9 years ago. But only now is it something I'm kind of repeating in class and really focusing on and explain to people, because like I said, the problem was presented to me. The solution was presented to me, shall we say, 9 years
Yes.
ago, but I hadn't come across a problem yet. And that seems to be like the thing that, again, the thing that's forcing these changes. It was interesting as well. Like, I went to one of Preet's seminars, Staffordshire BJJ in the UK. I went, just as a guest as it was, and none of my other students were there, and the majority of the guys there, a few of them know Preet's work, but maybe they were doing a bit more the more atypical jiu-jitsu approach, and Preet was showing his sideways open guard stand up, and to me it kind of made sense. It was a solution to some problems that I'd seen, and so it was like, okay, here's a detail for something that is currently happening. For me, it kind of partially made sense, but to everyone else in the room, they're drilling this thing, and then they got it. They're all capable of doing it by the end, which again, it kind of like creates that interesting thing about drilling, I guess, is that you can do something correctly by the end of a session and be able to pull it off. Even against, we were doing it against resisting opponents. Preet was setting up the drill of, right, I need you to get up. I need you to hold this person down within these parameters. But I then turned around to him afterwards and said that was entirely useless.
Mm.
And the reason why I told him it was entirely useless is because even though you've shown them it works, you got them to figure out that within the parameters about how you may be adapting it to get up and hold the other person down and vice versa, they still don't have a reason for this.
Right.
Because I could literally have gone, fantastic seminar, great details there, Preet, well done, let's get a group photo. Right, guys, we've got 10 minutes left, everyone grab a roll. We'll get 2 rolls in, then we'll call it a day. And no one will use the technique because they have no context for needing it. Even though they can do it and they've managed to do it in a way that they can adapt around it, there still hasn't been the problem that was generated for it to be in there in the first place. And
Sure.
weirdly enough, I actually spoke to them, a couple of members since. It's been about 6 weeks now, 4 weeks or whatever it's been. And I asked them, like, how much of that are you still using? None. I was like, well, I don't know if that's me surprised or again, like, no disrespect to Preeti. It was a
No,
good
no, you're
seminar,
just analyzing
but
yeah.
yeah, it
I think
was
it's
such
totally fine.
an interesting moment of, there's so many layers to this that outside of, here's a normal approach to jiu-jitsu, here's a technique, here's a drill, do it. They can go, right, well, here's a resisted drill, and I need you to find your, the within the parameters of how this works and adapt to the different variables that you're going to face. But then if
I
we're not
think
even approaching the problem, it becomes dead anyway.
exactly, and I think part of the problem is a relationship between exploration and exploitation. So when we want to understand a relationship in the world, we explore it, we touch it, we prod it, we mess with it, we try to fuck with it to see what the hell's coming out of it. And then while we're doing that, we figure out how to manipulate it to whatever end we want to manipulate it for, and this is what we call an exploit. So once we understand how to generate an outcome from a generalized procedure, again, we should be able to repeat that if it's a stable enough solution and if it solves a problem that will present itself often. And so I think part of the issue is that Preet seems to be in this like exploratory space where he's trying to understand the limits and function of defensive postures, which in and of itself is valuable because he's exploring an idea. But the problem is, and I actually told this on the phone, and he'll tell you if you talk to him, I said that the problem with this is you're separating it from the whole game. You're separating it from the foundation of what we're doing. And now there's value in that for exploratory purposes to understand new exploits if these situations arise. But you can't fight like this because it's breaking the rule, right? So the idea is that I don't even think there is such a thing as, and people are going to fucking chew me up for this, but like defensive postures. Okay. And the reason I don't think, I know, right? And the reason
Pretty sure if I was a fairy, I would have died. If you saying that, dude. Like, you've heard of Peter Pan, like, that shit, you don't say that shit. Like, not in these hallowed podcast walls, for fuck's sake.
nothing is hallowed for Iconoclast. I can say whatever I want. But no, man, I mean, the thing is like, I don't believe in defensive postures because you're always doing what is good for you, which is always inadvertently going to be bad for your opponent. Okay, so even if we're in quote a defensive alignment, as you want to define it that way, meaning I'm not progressing towards what would be considered a dominant end, I'm still making progress towards an end, and it's going to require specific alignments to achieve that end. So there really is no separation between those two things, right? So let's say, for example, we're in a typical defensive versus offensive position, the mount, and your job is to separate one of my limbs from my body to start isolating it so you can attack it. And my job is to prevent that from happening as I try to destabilize you and put my legs back in front of you, which can be called defensive because as I try to destabilize you in the bottom position to create space, you have to prevent that while you're achieving your end. And while you're trying to separate my arm from my body, I'm trying to stop you from doing that while I progress to my end. So the thing is progression should always be what we're talking about. And progression should be defined as orienting ourselves in such a way that we're that much closer towards the end that we're trying to achieve, no matter where we are relative to one another. And that, I mean, that's the easiest way I can explain it. Like when I teach games, no matter what position we're playing and how we orient the games, it's always task v task. So if your job is to move my arms away from me to isolate them for some reason, my job is to prevent that as I try to get my legs back in front of you. So we're always opposing each other. So the question becomes who's defending and who's progressing.
That's actually quite interesting, and that I think a kind of similar moment I realized upon that. I think I might have even mentioned it. A fucking video that everyone kind of, I'm thankful for it. They had to defend everything video that I made 4 years ago, but holy shit, things have changed. But I think even then I mentioned this idea that you have this, we want those control points of the control points of grappling, the grappling clinch, of controlling the the extremities of the torso, as it were, the spine, and as in the limbs, and then essentially controlling the spine as well. essentially inhabiting the space between knees and armpits and back of the knees, back of the head, and the grilled chicken shape, defensive posture, as it were, is denying that space. And the person on top, looking at passing guard, is also trying to deny that space. I mean, I love watching this video of Rafa Mendes guard passing in competition where he's just clowning everyone,
Oh my
and
God, so good.
he's just doing the exact same. He's just denying people in that space while they throw their attack, opening up that space to then try and catch his, and he exploits that and moves into theirs. And it's a boxing fight. Like they leave their position of safety, hiding these things to try and get hold of his, and while he hides his and then counters
Goes
and
after
gets hold of yours. Yeah, exactly.
100%.
And
And
so I think I even said at the time, like, this essentially, the grilled chicken position is just the position of safety, and this guard fight is just a fight between two chickens. One's
no,
upright, one's on the rack.
and that's what fighting guys who train like that feel like. They feel like they're laying there waiting to get smashed. Like um, yeah, that's what it feels like, and it's sort of frustrating because I see the value in exploring it. I see the value in trying to understand the nuances of alignment as it relates to you being in an inefficient alignment where it's going to take more energy for you to progress than your partner. And so if we want that to be defined as defensive, then so be it. But either way, the end should be towards progress. Uh, and what I tell my guys is we're always fighting over the same thing. We can make it as granular as we want, but in a
Yeah.
general sense, we are attacking the periphery, the head, arms, and legs, to gain access to center mass. That's the hips, the shoulders, the chest, and the back, so that we can immobilize center mass, isolate, and reattack the periphery. You can define every action that's being taken into that. I've tried, man. I've tried to distill it down, but that's it. So it doesn't matter whether I'm on the bottom of the mounted position or I'm on your back. That generalized procedure, you're going to be somewhere within that scope, and you're trying to either be doing the immobilizing or you're going to be trying to resist being immobilized as you work towards immobilizing. So
But again, like, I've been so excited that when we restarted this to be able to talk to you, because it feels like I say something partially similar in that I refer to it as major and minor control. Is in I want to open up the space between your hips and armpits to be able to control your majority, your torso, in some fashion. And once I've gone for majority control, I need to then move to minority control of going for your arm or leg, and controlling the a joint below and above and below what that is, and the joint closest to the, like I said, the center mass, the torso, is my control joint, and the furthest away is usually my submission joint. And anyone who ever met who's a elite level leg lock artist, for example, the amount of control they put through the control joint, the one nearest to my torso,
yep.
is frightening.
I know. I trained about 10 hours with Eddie Cummings, and what I
Oh,
tell
dude.
everybody was legitimately, it was beautiful and frightening all at the same time, right? So it's beautiful in the sense that the amount of direct and indirect control, which I can describe in a second, that he exhibits over your body is impressive. Like, and I've trained with all different types of people. When the first time he rolled, I walked away from that shit like, dude, I'm gonna train with this guy again. So I literally would go up to Unity because he had left his death squad, and I would do an hour. He'd be like, do you want to learn something? I'm like, no, we're just gonna do rounds. This is what I want. We're gonna fight. And it was like I would go home on the train rubbing my knees like fuck, because like he was brutal, like super fast, super precise, super controlling and mean, which I like. I appreciate that deeply. I have no negatives to say about him, but to feel it actually being done like in person was a different experience. And
Yeah.
that's what I showed too. I mean, I could never establish anything that we can define as control. And so for my guys, I say that control is a concept and we can discuss it at many levels. But in general, to control somebody, you have to take away time, space, and material. So when we're interacting with somebody, we're either imposing time demands on them by forcing them to resist us. We're imposing space demands by denying motion. And we're imposing material demands by taking away things they could use to defend themselves. Um, and we can only say we're controlling somebody if we're imposing those demands either across the spectrum or aspects of each of those, um, or each of those aspects.
Exactly. And it's fascinating. Like I say, I mean, the expression of that idea from what Eddie was doing, and again, it's one of those things that I found with elite level people in this sport. And then it kind of makes you think, kind of where I want to lead on to with this, where there's um, why the fuck aren't the rest of us doing this? Like the second I felt like that kind of pressure through a leg, I was like, the fuck have I been doing up until now?
Well, we didn't
Um,
understand where to put our attention. We didn't know what made
yeah,
it work, right? We're spamming moves, dude. We're spamming a step-by-step process that we saw in the DVD.
yeah,
We
yeah.
didn't know what the function and limit of the connection was. We had no idea, right? And we didn't even have a fundamental basis to attach our focus to. Like, who told you that immobilization is what led to strangulation and breaking? Like, who told you that? And if they did tell you that, did they define immobilization for you and the mechanics by which a limb gets immobilized? No, no one ever told us any of this. So of course we didn't know.
So the question then becomes like, and I guess I'm saying this from a point of view that I'm doing my best to try and change how people are coaching. And I actually, when I was with Ryan back in August, I did ask. 'Cause I watched his class and I was blown away because I've been around enough gyms in the UK and a bit of the States, and it was all the usual approach. And then to go see Ryan teach and just the call and response he's got going, and how he shows his class, I was like, wow, that is different to say the least. And I sat with him afterwards and went, how do you get over the anxiety that you think you're going to fuck up your students by completely rewriting how you teach this
Mm.
um, into this a new method? And so that's it was one of the issues that I had, because especially in a competitive sport like this, is that you feel that sometimes if you step outside the given approach, which you could argue has worked up until now.
Um,
Um,
Only
I
if
am
you have a
not
very
going to.
loose definition of that.
I know. Stop. I'm devil's advocate here. Um, is yeah, and it's like that. Looking from especially as a junior coach coming through into now like a more established coach, and over time, especially getting the black belt, I don't want to fuck up my students. I don't want to then go, guys, we're not doing anything how we used to do. We're going to do it this way now. Hustle up. Let's get to work. And then they all go into competition and get fucking trounced or something. I'm like, that'd be a nightmare. Which then could make me not want to do different and just stick to the normal approach. And so I'm trying to especially when I do seminars and stuff, is I teach very little technique, and I try and talk about mindset a lot differently, and coaching practices. But what advice do you think you'd have to convince someone to step out, take the risk and step outside of this, as it were, and not feel as anxious?
Well, there's a lot of different, I guess, ways I can answer that question, but I'll share how it happened to me. So when I started my school, I came across this idea, like very simple through white papers and abstracts written by scientists. So it really had nothing to do with grappling. It all had to do with like catching balls and playing blinking games. And so I was really had to like pull out what I thought was the meat of what they were trying to say, and then I had to start applying it. And so the first thing I would say is that you should care more about trying to apply an idea and see the effect it has than just repeating the effect that everyone's always getting. Because if you always repeat the effect that everyone's always getting, you're always going to get what everyone got, and you're not going to be able to push the envelope. So trying to have an effect on your students towards a positive end is the starting point. And the second thing is, as I started this, I wasn't confident to create a whole class around it. So what I would do is I would select special students who were intelligent and who were there every day. And I'd be like, hey, listen, I got this idea for you. I want you to focus your intention and attention on this thing. And I want you to try to perform this task. Let's talk in 3 weeks. I want you to tell me what outcomes you were having and let's discuss it. So that was the first way I started approaching this. I would select students to do it. And then in 2016, coincidentally enough, when I went up to the desk squad, I talked to John Danaher. And I was like, dude, does our language sound similar? Are you reading something that you're like holding? And he's like, no, I'm not reading anything. And I was like, then why did what we say sound so similar? And he said, because we're experiencing the same phenomenon, we're just paying attention. And I was like, well, how do you know that you're doing it right? And he's like, I don't. He's like, I use trial and error. He's like, I may spend 6 months going in one direction only to realize I'm wrong. So I have to turn around and do it again. And after we had that conversation, I came back and changed my classes immediately. because I realized that's all we can do. If we really want to know what's on the other side, we got to start walking. Okay, to having fear of quote messing somebody up is to believe that we understand how to mess somebody up. I don't even know how to. Back then, I didn't know how to make it right. So fuck messing it up. Might as well start from scratch. And that's sort of what I did. So I changed my language. I changed my class structure. I started trying to define. I try to define different ways to describe things in human language rather than symbolic language like Barambolas and Kiss of the Dragons and Kazushi. Anyway, uh, man, fuck your students up, bro. See if you can. You might end
I
up fixing them.
Weirdly, it was actually a local black belt to me that I guess said something rather similar at the time, which maybe the traditional aspects of jiu-jitsu are fucking us up as well. Is that with regards to I was a blue belt at the time. There was no black belt. There'd never been a black belt in my gym, and I thought, fuck, I'm going to book one for a seminar. And so he was like the first guy I was going to book, and I said to him, "Oh, do you mind if we record it?" And he went, "I'd rather you didn't." I was like, "Oh shit, okay." Then this is like 2014 or 13 or whatever it was. I was like, "Is there a particular reason why?" And he went, "Because if you record it, I can guarantee by the time I've said it, it's going to be out of date. And if you want the best information out of me, like, and for me to hear that from a black belt, this mystical being capable of magic, to say that, yeah, I'm going to be wrong pretty soon on what I've just told you. I was like, how? You're a black belt, and
You already knew he was wrong.
yeah, exactly. It makes it even funnier. And so that's like one of the things that over time I've kind of I get that was getting that a fair bit. Like guys come to me and they learn something from me, and then they come back to me in 6 months' time to go, why are you saying that? You said this to me 6 months ago. I'm like, yeah, but I was wrong then, or not as right as I could be. As you say, my efficiency wasn't there yet. I've been paying attention.
Yeah, no, I see. Very good. You're English. I figured you would be.
Thanks. And so yeah, it was this idea that I'm learning. I'm essentially my black belt means I've just been here longer. That's about it, and I'm still figuring this out. And so if you hear me say anything, understand that probably by the time it's come out of my mouth, I understand it better now. And talk to me again tomorrow. It's probably going to sound even better. And I think tying yourself to your belt sounds a weird way of saying that, actually.
Should be. Whatever.
And not willing to become uh, humiliated to an extent on what you've said. A prime example is like, again, like I've used this a few times, this idea that when you're teaching class as a junior instructor, to kind of like demonstrate your worth, that you are still the person in the room to go to, you try and show more elaborate shit every class. Like, I need to know show a new setup, or I need to show a new finish, or I need to show a new pass or something like that. And you just always trying to one up yourself with regards to like, oh, look how good I am at what I'm doing. Instead of just going, fuck, I'm allowed to fail. And I think, thank you. Like hearing someone like Danaher even say that, like, and Ryan say that, of like, oh fuck, you can fuck up. Like, it's cool to fuck up. Like, don't worry about fucking up. If you have that kind of relationship with your students, that you're all working together and see yourself on the same plane of existence, they'll allow you to fuck up as much as they fuck up. But if you have to set yourself up as this mystical being of a black belt who can't fuck up, then I guess you won't take risks.
Oh no, for sure. And that's kind of what disgusts me about like black belt culture and the way people run their schools. It's like you're just a guy, bro. Like you're a guy who hopefully likes jiu-jitsu more than your students, and you're trying to guide them along to be better than you. So you should be in the trenches with them, trial and error,
Yeah.
experimenting, failure, success, because that's what we're teaching them to do. So if we're not willing to do that with them as our knowledge progresses, as our understanding progresses, then you're not doing your job appropriately, and you're trying to get your student to do something that you're not even willing to do. And I always, man, I try to keep it as real as I can, man. Like, I tell, like, even till now, like, I'm 39, I've got a broken fucking body, but I really don't care. Like, and I tell people, like, if you come to roll with me and you don't try to beat me up, don't come to me ever again. Like, I even try to put that into the culture. Like, we're here together, we're both on the mat. The only reason you quote respect me because you think I represent something that's mystical and magical. But the truth is, man, I'm just a mat rat. I'm any other guy. So we're in this together. Let's go, you know. And so I try to keep it real with my students. You know, I even tell them when I fuck up, like, yeah, I was wrong. Let's do something different. That sucked. You know.
Yeah. And I actually said I've said it a couple of times in classes recently that the way that a lot of my students coming through, like my blue belts, etc. Right now, I'm like, I don't know how the fuck to hold you down. It makes me not want to wear my black belt. If I didn't sound like a pretentious dick for doing it, I'd hand it back and go down a couple. I'd happily put a purple back on for the time being because I do not feel as good as this bit of fabric should make me look. And yeah, I sat there in class as well, like, it's talking about this, holding someone down effectively, and the my ability to even do it is limited, and saying, look, I don't know what the fuck to teach normal anymore. Like, because of this, I don't know how to teach side control anymore. Like, I've my we're going to do the same game day in, day out now, until we crack it, because currently I don't know what the fuck to do afterwards because I can't find it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, that's really why I sort of kind of try to come up with this framework so we could explore the idea of variation while trying to search for consistency and outcome. You know, it's like I tell my students, all jiu-jitsu is a priority-based system uh, through a structural hierarchy as a search for physical certainty. And so we want to approach this process from many different angles with as much variability as possible, but we want to try to understand why we're taking action towards one end or another. So even if, because I use that common language of your basic thing. So for example, in my foundations class, we only explore 6 positions. 3 are pins and 3 are guards. So we do side control, alignment, mount, and back. And I'll explain that more deeply so you can understand what I mean by side control. And then we have open guard, closed guard, half guard. And so really the only reason I make a distinction between, let's say, like side control and mount is because the degrees between perpendicularity and parallelity, that's a fake word, but I'm using it, between those 2 degrees, there's this whole world that exists. So we have to be able to recognize when we're aligned one way versus another. But the objective that we're trying to reach is always the same. And so same thing with guards, right? Our legs are either closed around an aspect of our opponent's body or open, right? So that's why you have closed, that's around the waist. We have half, which is 2 legs interacting with one. And then we have open. Our legs are open and connected via post and hook. And so you can explore a lot, or 90% of jiu-jitsu with just those 6 positions, top and bottom. And it pretty much covers all the stereotypical things that are going to happen to a beginner as they learn how to play the basic game of stay on top, hold your partner down, isolate limbs, break and strangle. Bottom player, keep hands and feet on opponent. Don't let them pass your legs. If they do, get them back, destabilize them. You become the top player. And so that's the basic game we have to teach them how to play. And it's very easy to express that through those 6 positions. So rather than teach the position, we teach the function of the position. So the bottom player is always doing the same thing, making and maintaining connection for the purpose of controlling distance for the purpose of destabilization. If you don't have connections, we use movement to create space. So we can put in frames to make connections, use frames to make more movement to make more connections until we're regarded. And then we repeat the process all over again. Anyway.
Weirdly enough, like, aside from the regarding, like, we essentially just say, like, get the fuck up. We're using the exact same process right now of the elbow frame, and it was the motion aspect that's probably the most recent part of using the frame to create the motion to then create the outcome.
So I heard you say that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to say one thing because I remembered this when I was listening to your podcast. You were saying just get the fuck up, right? So I actually agree. But there's a dilemma we're playing actually when we're grounded. So once you're the bottom guy, basically our limbs function as 2 different things, frames and base points. They can't be both at the same time. So when we're maximally framed, all 4 points or all 4 limbs are effectively attached to our opponent to manage distance. When we base on the ground, or we can only really start basing with 2 points of contact. So once we put those 2 points of contact, those are 2 frames that are lost. So now to manage distance, we have to take up that slack with motion, hip movement. So we have to determine what's the best way to go from a grounded position to a based position and ultimately back up while under the pressure of somebody holding us down. So we make that choice relative to the level of destabilization present in the system. So if a top player is fully attached to you and pinning you to the mat, the most efficient way to start destabilization is to use all four limbs. But once destabilization occurs, we can sacrifice some of those frames and turn them into base points so we can immobilize our hips and get to our feet. So it's more efficient to use four tools to start the destabilization process to assist in building a base and getting up than to ignore the pressures that are in front of you and say, just get the fuck up. So it's just a question of what's going to more efficiently get me to my feet.
Yeah.
One more thing, and I'll shut up, I swear, is I tell my students, you only need to be as threatening from the bottom as you need to be to get up. So your guard is inherently a defensive position, and it should be utilized to put you in a progressive position.
So how do you mean by that? Because I'm roughly probably about to say the exact same thing.
So when I'm on the bottom, I am forced to use my arms and legs as a way to manage distance. I don't have a choice. So that is what makes it, quote, a defensive position. And I'm saying in quotes because we talked about the dichotomy between defense and no defense. It's sort of like two sides of the same coin. It's not really, but it's defensive in the sense that it's being imposed upon me. Even if I choose to go to my back, I'm limiting myself. So if we know that we play the game of immobilization as it leads to strangulation and breaking, and we know that some alignments are more mobile than others, and we choose an alignment that reduces mobility beyond our opponents, then we could consider that a defensive response because we're doing it either against our will or not towards the ultimate end, which is to immobilize them, not ourselves. So I don't know if that explains it for you.
No, it's again like I feel like I've always circling similar ideas, but in an ape-like sense. Is that the way I've been like beating into people recently is this idea that I refer to as the three S's. You should sweep, sub, or stand. You should sweep or sub if you cannot stand. And essentially the same thing, like I should be attacking your balance or fighting doggedly for submission to threaten you. And I should be doing that because I can't get up because you are aggressively attacking me. So I have to apply aggression back. I'm cornered. I have to, if I'm just passively lying here, I'm doomed.
And I think what you're saying is exactly right. That's what we need to do. But then the question becomes is how do we orient our intention and attention around that action? So then it becomes what is foundationally similar in all grounded situations? And it's one, the strength of our connections and what we use them for. So we cannot manipulate an object unless we connect to it. And the question becomes is what are we connecting to? Well, we're connecting someone with the intention of holding us down. How do they hold us down? They take all our space away and put their weight on us. So then that would suggest that the first foundation of our connections is to manage that distance so that cannot happen to an effective degree at which we get stuck. Then the second thing becomes, as we're managing distance, what's the problem? Well, I'm still on the ground. Well, how do I get this weight off me? I have to destabilize it. I have to get it off of me in a way where I'm carrying less weight than they are. So if I can make them carry their own weight, the weight's reduced from me and now I can come up. So then I came up with all guarded positions have the same function. Their function is to make and maintain connection for the purpose of managing distance, for the purpose of destabilization. And that's the precursor to sweeping, standing, and submitting. If the body is stable, we can't sweep, submit, or stand against it. So again, that suggests action towards destabilization.
Again, like it's fascinating. A lot of these things you hear, especially like I was in talk about the destabilization when someone's on just doing this thing with Charles Harriott over at Fanatics is I don't think he kind of maybe expressed it as much as he should have, but the thing that kind of changed everything for us is this idea that if I can't, I'm going to drive myself away from you, especially if you're holding on to me and trying to like destabilize you, because whilst you're trying to hold me and I'm essentially shaking underneath you by moving away and swimming away from you across the floor, if you create any emotion to try and chase me or carrying up my body to pass my guard, that gives me the space to get up. But if I stay exactly still while you're putting pressure on me, I can't do that unless I again fuck with your base and fuck with your balance.
But remember, both players are in motion. So the thing is if you're on the floor running backwards, I can be on top of you running forward. And that's not necessarily going to break my balance if I know how to play that exchange.
Yes.
Because if you're fleeing or yielding, I know that my destabilization is going forward. So then I orient my base to prevent falling forward in such a way that would cause me to become the bottom player. So again, here's the issue. The bottom player has two things it has to connect to manipulate itself out of its position, the floor and the person, and it has to split the difference. So then what is the most efficient way to both connect to our opponent and connect to the floor as it relates to what you're asking them to do? Sweep, submit, or stand. So we need to understand that functional relationship. And this is where we get the difference between skill and technique. Technique is a process by which we get an outcome. Skill is our ability to manipulate all the novelty present within that situation to get our outcome. So the skill isn't sweeping or submitting or standing. The skill is destabilization, because your ability to connect and to manage distance and destabilize opponent leads to all three outcomes. Those are the necessary precursors. So if you spent the next 5 years of your life learning how to use your connections to manage distance and destabilize with no real technical end except that, you're going to feel like a nightmare to stand in front of. People are feel like they can't touch you.
Yeah.
They're going to feel like they can't put weight on you.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting as well, especially because of a lot of the stuff I've been putting out recently, and you know, the black belts in my gym are very interested in this. I'm kind of excited to, you know, once we're out of this, I'm literally going to download it and send it straight to them and go, you need to listen to this. Like it's quite interesting.
I really hope so, man. Like that's kind of my point. Like I'm real excited because I figure all of us talking, we're going to tell each other what we're discovering, and it's going to strengthen our understanding. You know, that's
Yes.
why I go so hard with my explanation, because I want to make sure that when I join this fucking conversation, that I'm a valuable speaker. Because again, someone's going to impose that on me, and then we're going to have to challenge each other's views and hopefully grow from it.
Yes. Completely, and it'd be a lot of fun as well to I mean, we've threatened this idea before, like Preet and I, about having not like a seminar, but almost like a workshop panel, like where people are watching instead of, you know, instead of us essentially teaching to a room. It's just a bunch of interesting folks, shall we say, just sharing these ideas across the room and bouncing these ways of teaching across to each other with an audience, like almost like a panel, as it were. So if we could ever do this in podcast form or even in person, if we ever end up in the States at the same time, or if you ever come over to Europe, it'd be a lot of fun to actually like do a lot of what you've just been saying, but with actual physical footage, as it were.
Oh no, for sure. I mean, like I got invited to do this. Like they're doing this thing over here in north of me, called the Summit. A school owner over here is getting a bunch of guys together to teach like a weekend of seminars.
Okay.
And so basically what I'm doing is I don't show technique or show details or anything like that. I teach. It's a very different thing. So I'm literally going to go run a practice for them and teach them how to use the methods of definitions, objectives, and task orientation to orient practice or to design practice. So I'm going to run them through one of my foundational practices. So that's going to be what I give to the seminar. I mean, sure, other guys would show like, you know, K-guard and Choi bars, but I'm going to teach people how to hold people down and break their limbs.
So when is that? Like, it'll be interesting if I can swing it somehow.
It's in July. I don't know the
Okay.
exact date. Like I can't remember dates, so I literally have to have people check me all the time and tell me like when it is in time, because I forget. I mean, I do the same thing every day. It's like I fucking forget that it's what month it is. May. It's May right now.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Possibly. Could be. I'm not sure either.
I don't fucking know. I really don't know. Like, oh God, like last night I had this coaching thing this morning, and I had to tell everybody that we had to go an hour earlier because I had to be in Pennsylvania, and I almost forgot. I almost forgot that it wasn't an hour earlier because I'd convinced myself that we were already going to do it, and I was like, fuck. I think about one thing, man, and then everything else gets messed up. I can't think about anything else.
Yeah, I get you. I get you. Like I said, I mean, hopefully maybe towards the end of the year we can, you know, I'm pretty sure Preet's calendar's fucked forever. But I'd love to,
never
like,
stops moving.
dude, I don't know
everywhere.
where he finds the time to do anything. I mean, I get burnt out from the amount I'm doing and have to have, you know, a bit of time where I go, fuck jiu-jitsu for a bit. I'll go mental if I do this anymore. But I said, I'm quite fortunate I get to come out to the States more often than not. And so I'd love to pop in and you know, share these ideas and actually record some stuff with you if that's ever something you're interested in.
It's, I mean, I'm always interested, man. Like my gym's free for everyone to visit. I encourage people to come here all the time. I don't just say what I say, I do what I say. So I really like people to see it for themselves. I was actually really happy your buddy Rob Cole came over here and just spent the weekend with us.
Yeah.
And so he can kind of talk to you about what we did and how his experience was. I had him train with my 2-year blue belt, Noah, who I've been telling everyone about. Um,
He did say you guys are monsters, beasts. I think the word was. So
just
yeah,
for just a bunch of jiu-jitsu junkies, man. That's all.
as it always should be. Well, it's getting late for you, but it's 3 a.m. for me,
For
and
sure, man.
if I don't stop, I'm not going to make my flight to Amsterdam. So,
You're a soldier, dude. I love it, man. I actually like you like 10% more. That's fucking awesome.
so I need to at least sleep at some point. This has been I've really enjoyed this. I'm so glad we went at it this way round and just went for it, and I'm thank you for taking the time out to have a chat, and hopefully if you ever for another one we can do this again in the very not too distant future.
Yeah, I'm really up for anything, man. You just reach out to me. I'm as communicative as I can possibly be. I talk to everyone who messages me, and plus,
Yeah.
I really do. I spend hours talking to people, trying to be better at communicating these ideas, and of course helping my own community because jujitsu is for all of us. I know it sounds cheesy as fuck, but I want people to do real jujitsu. I want it to become fighting again, and I want to try to share what I'm discovering. So
Completely, and I feel again. This feels like a Rogan podcast, and don't want to say you're Jordan Peterson. That sounds.
Yeah, compare me to Jordan Peterson, man. He's kind of a pussy. He's crying on the mic and shit.
Yeah, I was like, I won't use that. I won't use that. Like, I'm trying to make friends here, and calling you Jordan Peterson may not be a way of doing that.
Be like, yo, bro, I enjoyed talking to you. Got some sick shit to say, and then we're immediately friends. We're good.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and like I said, I mean, I'm glad we've done this, and hopefully we can repeat it again and do more in the future. And just thank you for your time. And
oh man, thank you too.
Yeah, this has been. I'm sure this was a podcast, not a phone conversation. So yeah, thank you to anyone who's listened to this. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you, Greg.